Hello, welcome back to part 2 of Marta Ceramics table lamp tutorial. In this video we will be looking at how to texture paint and achieve very photorealistic look of the ceramic base. So without really long intros, let's get into the video. So first things first, we need to UV unwrap this base for texture paint to work properly. So let's move to our UV editing mode up in the workspace. So rule of thumb with the UV unwrapping is to place as little seams as possible in spaces where seams would naturally occur in the material. So I will start with selecting these two circles, as those would be different material. It would be just a bare clay. So I have selected both circles. Press U to mark seam. So now the seam is marked. If we select all, press U again and go to unwrap, we can start seeing that it starts appearing here. It's not fully unwrapped yet. We are going to do more of it. So I select with Alt left click. It has to split somewhere, and I will be showing you how to blend the seam together to not see it when we are texture painting. So let's just unwrap this. Before you press unwrap, you have to select the whole thing by pressing A. So now we have more or less unwrapped the base. What we can do is go into show overlays, and if we go to display stretch, we can see if the UV map is stretched or not. It is slightly stretched in these places. Ideally we want to get this blue, dark blue, so it's not stretched at all. I'm gonna place another seam around there. Mark seam, select all, UV unwrap. It is going to be slightly stretched there, but I think for this purpose it's gonna be okay. If you want to see what you are selecting in your map, in your UV map, you can synchronize what you have selected in your object. It's not going to be super visible, so I can add a seam there as well, just to make sure it's as little stretched as possible. I don't want to split this much more, so let's just move on with what we have here. Few seams here, one in the middle and two on the top. So that's what we want to have, as minimal seams as possible. Unsync, select all, and click on this UV select mode island. Select things that we separated. By pressing G, you can move them around to make sure that we have enough space between them once we are starting texture painting, so they are not overlapping. For texture painting, it is quite important for the UV maps to not overlap. So now we have unwrapped the base. Let's go into shading mode. Numpad dot to zoom into selected object. So we want to create a new material. We can just leave it as it is. We are going to build this quite complex material over time. But first let's start by adding to base color an image texture color. So now it has turned black. Let's create a new image. What we want to do is name it so we can find it and set the size. What you can do is select both and do the maths in those areas. So for instance, I just pressed ×4 to create a 4K image. So now we have created blank image. Press OK. It appears here. What we need to do now, while we have this selected, the image texture node, so we go to texture paint and we have our image laid over our UV unwrapped part. But before we start, let's make sure that image is saved outside Blender. The reason is image texture is based on file path. So if you move image from one folder to another, it will be lost in a model and you have to relink it. Same goes to if you close the Blender file without saving image texture, all work will be lost. So you have to have that as a PNG. So if it disappears, and it might show up as this magenta pink, at least you can go back and relink the material. We now have our image saved. In case you don't see this UV unmap on top of your image, go back to your UV editing. If it's not selected, it doesn't show up. So go back to your UV editing, press A in edit mode, go back to your texture painting, and it should show up. We are ready to start texture painting. First, I will make another window underneath. You can just drag it out, as you can see. Let's open our reference image. Here it is. We are going to use this only to see the colors for the reference. So for the texture paint, let's start by just turning this all in white, just because it's easier for us. So you can see that changed as well. Let's use just a simple brush to start by texture painting the first layer. Simple colors, and then we are gonna work our way inwards and starting to add details like this little part where the glazes are merging together. To see what we are doing, let's switch to material preview. By the way, to switch up these colors, because you have a foreground and background color, same as in Photoshop, just press X and it's gonna swap around the opposite color that you have. So I will start by using this color, and we can paint it on top here, and we can paint on top our map. So by pressing F, you can change the radius of the brush. So let's get into painting now. So we can see the seam is here. What we can do is just, let's reduce it and just paint it on top of the object at the moment, just to blend it together. As glaze is not very precise and tends to in the mind of its own, it's okay to not have it straight all across the object. It works in our favor. So now when we have finished our first part of the texture paint, just our very simple colors, let's make sure we re-save. As you can see, there's like this little star by the image. Make sure you save it for it to apply the changes. Let's work onto these little parts that we have glaze blends. To achieve that, we are going to change our blending mode, and also we are going to apply textures to our brush. First, we are going to add a new brush in our active tool settings. Let's duplicate that. So now when we go on here, you can see we have to rename it as a texture brush, just to make sure it's there. To achieve this, let's explore a little bit the blending modes. Blending modes are located here, and it works pretty much the same as in Photoshop, where multiply takes only the dark values and keeps layering them on top. screen takes only the light values, and again, like layering on top. These will be two blending modes that we will be using in this case. So I will start by multiply. I will take a color picker. So now if I start pressing, you can see it's like layering on top. This is too strong to use in this case. So we're gonna lower strength to about 0.15. It is subtle, but that's exactly what we need for the achieving photorealistic look. Those little changes will be seen. So let's get into getting the first layer of paint done. Now let's switch colors and let's use screen to blend this area. As you can see, I have gone a little bit over the top, so we can go back to mix mode. And I will add a little bit back. So now we have a background for our texture paint that we are gonna apply now. So we have our texture brush. We can duplicate it again to have noise texture. Make sure again to save it, just to save the image changes that we have done. We have, as you can see, multiple brushes. So let's use the noise texture one, and let's go into our active tool settings. Go to texture and press on new. So now, once we go to our texture properties, that's the texture we just made. Let's change the type to clouds. So let's increase the size to about 50. Let's add a little bit of a depth to level 3, and nabla let's change to 0.1. Now let's get into colors and decrease the brightness to about 98. Increase the contrast to 1.79 and saturation to 1.16. So it starts to like have more contrast between the black and white values. And now I'm also adding a color ramp to it. What we are gonna do is first like add colors that we need for this part of the blend. The black color we are gonna change to the color picker to that brown color. As you can see, it starts to appear there. And the white one we're also going to change to the same brown color. So we just have those black values and brown values. We're gonna swap with the places. And this one, this brown from the end, we are gonna down to 0.68 to have more coming through. As you can see, we can increase it. About 0.68 is fine. So now we have this texture that we have applied. And if we just go here, it starts to appear, which is great. That's exactly what we want. But see, the thing what happens is it builds as a tile. So if we go to this where the texture is displayed, if you look, it says tiled. So if we change it to random, now let's just undo this texture that I just have put on. So if I now change it, it's not repeating itself. It applies different parts of that map. So let's just add this. So we have more detail. It might look a bit too unnatural at the moment. So what we are going to do is, again, make sure we save it. We are going to change the blend mode. We were on a mix mode in this one. We can go now to multiply and add a little bit more layers. So now we have a little bit more depth to this area. What we want to do is now change to screen and add a little bit like the lighter values, as you can see, just to give a little bit more depth to this line. So now we have part where it blends all together. Obviously you can spend much more time to do like as much texture painting as you want. Now we want to do the same for this area, for the other blend part, to see where the white blends together with the gray. Let's just save it again. It's just a good practice to just keep saving as you see that little star appearing. Just keep saving your stuff. So now what we are going to do is, again, I'm going to duplicate another brush. I'm going to change it to noise texture 2. And we are going to make, let's add another texture, new texture. Actually, probably can just take, let's just take this texture and duplicate it. With this, we can just duplicate it and change the colors here from the brown ones to take the gray values. So now we have this texture here. It is put on random already because we just duplicated the brush. Let's get into this part all textured up. We are on the screen, which is good. So let's get texturing. So now we have finished with our first texture paint. Let's save it, make sure that it is saved. So now if we look in our shading mode, this is our base image. So now let's reduce the roughness to about 0.114. The reason why I'm not going all the way, because it's not really as shiny as a mirror, so we want to just make sure that it is glossy enough to come across as a glaze, but not too shiny. The other thing that usually glazes have is like a little speckle inside. Even if it's a very plain glaze, it still has a little bit of like that graininess in. You can obviously add it in the texture paint, but I like to have control of that texture. So what we are gonna do is add a noise texture for this reason. Shift A to add noise texture. We want to combine these two together. So we are gonna use multiply node. If I look up, multiply through mixing mode. So what I want to do is add in factor into first one. So we are layering on top of the base. So you can see like just a little bit. So if we just increase the factor to 1, we can see the underneath our image texture, but on top of it we have the noise texture, which we are gonna now adjust. We want to go this quite low to achieve little speckles. Let's go about 90. Increase the roughness of it, make them very little and very light ones, because this one is very overpowering. Now add a color ramp. Reduce the value of, let's go quite light. So now we have a little bit of that texture on top, but it's still not really looking as a grains. Create mapping vector, and that vector to be plugged into texture coordinate generated. Reduce this. As you can see, it starts to like sort of shrink. It starts to appear quite long rather than very speckled. Increase this as well. Let's see if we can adjust this to give like bigger contrast. This is kind of right. We can maybe just slightly reduce this lower just to give a little bit more texture. So as we have added that, add slight bump, go to normal, bump. Gonna take this, down to height. And it's probably gonna, yeah, it's gonna look crazy at the moment because the distance is too high. So we want to go at least, this is still even too high. Gives a bit too much of a roughness at the moment. We are not done with the bump part. The little freckle is just one thing. We want to add another noise texture to create more depth to that bump. Duplicate this, change the scale to 2 to give like just a overall imperfect sort of shape to the base without adding extra geometry. To combine both of them, duplicate the multiply, add. So you can see it's slightly calmed down. Give a little bit of imperfection in the shape itself. I think I know where I messed up. Now let's add a color ramp into this second one. That should give, yes, we don't need to invert it. See, adds like a tiny speckle to it. And make sure, yeah, you connect, instead of connecting the noise texture to this bump, add the color ramp. So I just did a little mistake, and it is very important where you plug what thing in. This distance you can't even see it, but if you have close-up of this lamp, then you can see at least like these little textures there. So what we want to do now is copy these texture maps, change all the values back to 1, and plug these two maps together. So let's move on. The other thing that we need to do, add a little bit of a layer of the detail where the glazes are coming together, where they are blending together, as they would increase a little bit thickness in those areas. Create another texture paint. In the displacement, we are gonna add displacement, and we are gonna add in a height, another image texture node. But we don't want to add the same base texture. The reason is because it's the same image. So if I change this to non-color, you see it has messed up the color that we created. So what we want to do is actually going to duplicate it. Still has changed this to non-color, so we are gonna change this back to sRGB as we need color of it. Make sure we use this, and we are gonna go back to texture paint. So we are on the base texture 0.001. What we can do is just change it to base texture 2. Let's save as a separate, save as rather than save, and change it to name that we just typed in. So save as, let's just see. So we have a texture paint 1 and texture paint 2. We will want to see what we are doing. So first I'm going to press Shift Control and right click to see just this texture paint, because that's at the moment what we are working on. And we are going to create a black and white map. To create the displacement, it really needs only the white and black values. Make sure you are on the right brush. To these places where the actual melting areas are in white. Create a new brush, and we are gonna call this displacement brush because it will have a little bit different texture added to it. Slightly larger, slightly more softer, because we don't want like those jagged lines. As you can see in displacement, it shows almost like a cliff or something. So let's add a new texture. We are gonna go back to clouds, increase a little bit larger than before. I'm gonna add quite a bit of contrast. So it's like kind of soft those areas where the texture is. One of displacement brush. Take the texture, yes. Let's see how it looks like. It's again on a tiled, so let's change to random to make sure. And we are gonna go to multiply. Just need to make sure I'm on the right one. Like that the black color is at the back. Yeah, that's pretty good. So let's just do a little bit of a texture painting here. I'm gonna go back to our standard brush. Gonna reduce the strength. Gonna go to multiply again. Again, make sure you are on the right color and just soften it even more by adding dark values, just laying over the top. So when we go back to shading, I'm just reconnecting the main principal shader to the surface. Remember to save this, and let's adjust the strength of it. We want to go with this maybe to even this level. So it's still quite strong, but it's starting to look like we kind of want to achieve. So if I go to just 1, it's looking better. It looks like here it's a little bit too low. So what I can do is go take the strength up. Now can just adjust it slightly. Kind of want to make it a little bit less prominent, because at the moment it's almost like has a little bit like a peeling effect, I would say. Let's just lower the strength again, do a little bit more. Another thing we can do is add a little blur, just to blur those lines that are quite sharp. You want to do it in the image rather than on the object, as it takes a much longer time to recalculate. So it looks pretty good. We will leave it as that. So that's pretty much our base for the lamp. Remember, make sure you save the image. So this is the full extent of the image. I'll place the screenshot here. You can pause the video. You can see the full build-up of the material. And I will be just quickly showing how to do the metal fixtures. Let's start by adding this one. Will be super simple, just a new material. Just go to metallic, go down in the roughness, and that is pretty much it. We can adjust the color if we want to make it slightly darker, but that is pretty much what we want in this material. Other materials will be quite simple as well. This one quite similar, just create metallic material for the screw top. What we can do is go into it, select one, then press L to select the part that is not attached by mesh to the screw part. We go into material properties, we can add another material, create new, and as we have selected already that part, we can just assign it. I just leave it white as it would be some sort of ceramic base. For these legs, I would think it would be like a white powdered glossy metal. This will be another quite quick material, so let's just add a new material. And obviously you should really name all of them. rather than just material 1, material 2. I would think it needs a little bit shiny. If you can't see in the image, you can open preview to see how it looks. And because powdered metal has a little bit of a texture, let's add bump, let's add noise texture, and this is way too large, so let's decrease the scale to 25. Let's decrease the roughness as well, because it has just a very slight bump. Let's change this to, I think we probably will go to 0.001. Yeah, that looks alright. We can still decrease the scale, maybe to 40. We can decrease the detail as well, really, to 0. It's quite strong for the size of this. What we can do is actually divide with maths. Use the division, because the 0.001 is the smallest one that you can do. Let's divide by 5, and it is very slightly there. It doesn't have to be too much more than that. And now for this, I'm going to show you another technique for the materials, which is nice. If you have already downloaded the PBR materials, I will link it into the description. Free PBR material websites where you can get like nice image textures that have already all the maps in place, a more realistic look. So again, I will add a new material. We select this principled texture, and if you press Shift Ctrl T, it opens your file manager. Go to your place where you have your PBR textures. So I will go into, take this plain gray fabric. I will add, these are all 4K maps and principled texture. So basically what it does all the work for me. I don't have to think how to plug them together. Shift Ctrl T, find all the maps that you need, like they should be in the same place, because sometimes it confuses Blender if they are in different places. I'm gonna increase the scale for these because it's a bit too high in a grain, and it's always gonna do the UV map. So what we are gonna do, because we don't have this UV unwrap, go to UV unwrap, take doesn't really matter where you place the seam. It's not going to be too visible because the grain of the fabric is quite small. Mark seam. So now select all, U, and unwrap. So it's all pretty straight. Are they overlapping? No. So if we go now back to our shading, just to see, might be a little bit too small. Let's change to 5. There's a bit of this pulling here. Gonna place another seam here and here, like inside where the little edge is, and do the same on top. So it's a little bit still pulling a little bit. It could be just a preview. Let's see. Probably would like all of them to really go the opposite direction. Rotate 90. So it shouldn't really do any pulling, to be honest, because all the maps are, as you can see, like this, a dark blue, which means it's completely straight. It should be no stretch at all. Add another loop cut. You can always go back to it and add more stuff to it. Might just not like something in terms of how little geometry it has. Just adding some more. Yeah, it looks much better now. Just add another. Let's just add another light so we can maybe just 100, just so we can see how it looks. This is Eevee. We want to do the cycles render. I will now put the screenshots with how you should set up your cycles render engine to make sure it's not too long of a time when you render this stuff. Anyways, this is our lamp. with all the texture paint on. You can use it for your models. If you are doing any architectural visualization, this is a great item you can add to your library. Like this video, comment down below if you want to see any other object, subscribe to my channel, it really helps me out a lot. I'm very grateful for all the people who are here. We are growing by every week and I'm very happy about that. Yeah, that's it from me this week and have a good day.